podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first-time Stephen King reader.
Well, hi. We're here with peopling and books and everything. We are here discussing Insomnia, Stephen King. I have it. It's huge. In fact, it was published in 1994. It is 663 pages, at least this version. It's also like 7 years long on the audiobook version. Accurate, roughly. It was a big one. The dedication for this one says, for Tabby and for Al Cooper, who knows the playing field. No fault of mine. I am joined, as always, by my two lovely brothers, not my only two lovely brothers, but two of my lovely brothers. Ben and Luke are here. Hi, boys.
Hi, girl.
Howdy, friend, sister, you.
Person. I am a being. All right. The back-covered synopsis. It has one. Last time I had an issue, but this time it has one. Here we go. Ralph Roberts can't fall asleep, but he's still having nightmares. Ralph Roberts used to be an ordinary guy until insomnia robbed him of sleep. Now, he's no longer ordinary. He can see horrible things happening to the people of Derry, Maine. He can see how, one by one, they are turning into monsters straight from hell. He'd like to call them nightmares, but he's wide awake. He can't call himself crazy because there is another person who sees these happenings too. But even if seeing is believing, it still doesn't give him a clue of how to stop these deadly demonic visions from coming true.
Fair synopsis.
I don't know. It feels a little off to me, but okay, we'll move on. All right, so, let's do our shout out. Luke, can you do our welcome shout out for us there?
Yeah, so if you're new here, welcome. We ask that you give us a like and subscribe to our channel here on Drawbridge Media. We truly appreciate you finding us and however you got here. If you've been here before, welcome back. You kind of know the drill. We are going to do a full book discussion today, and we have some fun people in the live chat, so we look forward to getting into their thoughts as well as we go. So that's it.
Okay. This is the part where we get into our three big thoughts. Luke, I'm going to have you start with yours because I think this is a draw for us. So I'm going to have you start.
Sure. So I just have a note here that just kind of covers what I feel like is almost the first 2/5 of the book. It's more than a quarter. It's not quite half, but it's a healthy beginning portion, right? Like,
thank you for knowing fractions.
Right. So, I mean, it's a healthy beginning of the book, and it feels like it drags on forever. But it's really the setting in of the insomnia for our lead character, our protagonist, Ralph here. And it just goes through his struggles with it, and this is all post his wife being dead. She died. And he, of course, he's what, like 70 years old or so? Like, so they were together for a long, long time, and of course he's struggling with it in his own ways, and this insomnia starts setting in, and he's like, I don't even know if this is from my wife's death. Like, it was a couple months later kind of thing where it really started setting in, and we kind of go through and hear from his perspective what it's like to start waking up at 4 in the morning, what it's like, and progressively becoming like, oh, I go to bed at the same time and I'm waking up at 2 in the morning. Like, oh man, like just the struggle that he goes through and trying to research on what's going on, what are the different types of insomnia, and what kind of benefits are there out there for him to get help with this without going to the doctor that he doesn't trust because he potentially wrongfully diagnosed his wife's cancer that ended up killing her. So a lot of stuff going on with that, and then he starts seeing these auras, right? He's like, that is not something I've really read about in my insomnia research, but it probably makes sense. My mind's doing wacky things. So it's just kind of covering all of that because there's a lot of really boring stuff, but I think you have to have it because it shows how frustrating it is being in that, right? Like, I think it kind of needs to be rough to read a little bit so you can get into his headspace a bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like with the aura thing, I like how it's subtly brought in. He's just starting to see these, and then he's noticing that other people and other things are noticing them as well, such as uh the little girl, the daughter, and then the dog. He's like the dog's kind of paying attention to that kind of stuff. So he's picking up on those kind of things. And yeah, you're right. It's about 2/5 is fair. I'd almost say a third of the way through the book is finally when we get into stuff that actually is interesting. And I'm kind of going to jump into my thoughts with this tied into the first. This kind of goes across the whole thing. The literary and audiobook style. One reason why myself and Melissa have talked about this, but like we like the bigger books like like The Stand, like 11/22/63. That's a little bit different one because it kind of falls under the same thing I was going to say. But those two, It and Stand, at least have multiple people areas that you can follow, and they're as long as book, if not longer books than this. But this just felt like such a slog because it was one person. It was one person you were behind, and for the last two, this is the third book in a row where we've been in one person's mindset the entire time, and of the three, this was probably the toughest because it had the least amount of stuff going on, and it was the longest book, obviously. So there was just a lot of downtime, a lot of boringness. But my other point to the note, when I first downloaded the audiobook, I read the reviews of it, and one review stood out to me, and it was dead on. The audiobook was okay. Probably could be a better version, but the weird audio cues that they threw in at the weird mix levels,
Yeah.
Terrible. It was
blowing your
terrible.
ears out. Yeah, I mean, we talked about it with the last couple books. Like they'll do that, they'll like weird little background music, and it's like mood setting and everything like that. Great, but when I'm sitting there and it's kind of a quiet part, but it's getting into a stressful part, and then you hear this, and it's like, oh, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
It almost. This book took me the longest of any audiobook to listen to. Even at this, it took me 2 weeks to get through this book because I just did not like this narrator. I did not like the stylistic of it, and the writing style of this one. It was tough. It was tough. It was an interesting story. Don't get me wrong. The story itself was interesting, but the narration and even the writing style, I just could not get into. And I think the first third of the book, I barely remember any of it because I wasn't gonna go back and reread this one. This was a one reader.
I hope everyone is sitting down. I 100% agree with Benji. I've read this book before, again, probably 20 years ago, and I don't remember disliking it, but just one of the books, right? I've read many, but read around the same time I had read Dolores Claiborne. No big impression one way or the other for either of these books. Last month, Dolores Claiborne knocked me off my feet with how much I could connect to her. I really wanted to connect to Insomnia. And it's not from the lack of Ralph. Ralph is a fantastic character.
Agreed.
I would love to hear more about Ralph, except I don't need to hear any more about Ralph because I think it took me 2 weeks also to listen to this book. It just dragged, and I don't even know what happened in the parts that dragged. I can't tell you how it began. I refused to go back. I finished it like a week and a half ago. I've already started next month's book because I'm like, I have to cleanse, right? I like the Ralph stuff. I like seeing Mike Hamlin. I like some of the other characters. I liked Bill McGovern. I could relate to his sort of crotchety old man versus being this well-respected teacher thing. I thought that was a really interesting dynamic. I loved Lois. I loved her, how she kind of came off as kind of doofy, but then really was like this really put together kind of with it person that played a role in the I loved the group of old men who play chess out on the like I loved all of that. I liked Atropos and Clothos and all like I liked that story. I wasn't a big fan of Ed Dietno. I don't think I'm supposed to be, so that's fine. I feel like you could have done it in half the amount of time.
I'm gonna go on a limb and say that's probably a consensus with all three of us. I feel like they could have. I feel like it could have gotten the same interesting points, shaved out a lot of buffer. That just there's good character building stuff, but it's going nowhere. Like we already get it. Okay, we do get it. Like we've seen this before. You know, like how much time we spent in the car with Cujo, right? And it's like it feels like it takes a long time when you're stuck in the car, but like that's the emotion the author is trying to elicit, it seems like. But that was still like a quarter of the time that we spent just hanging out with Ralph, right? Like with nothing happening. Like
you're 10 hours into the audiobook and like nothing has happened.
Right,
yet.
absolutely.
And Ed beat his wife. Ralph confronted him. And then Auras.
And then more nothing happened for a while.
Yeah.
And a lot of abortion talk.
I 100% agree with you, Benji, as well on because I listen to tons of audiobooks every year, and yeah, the mixing on this one where you can't hear parts of the narration because the audio design you have going on is drowning it out. And yeah, there's some really harsh spots too where it's just like, okay, maybe one of those would be okay if you're like trying to strike an anxiety feel like that fits the thing, but it's too much. It's not needed here, and I think it should be redone. Someone needs to get that master file and tone it down, because I like the reader himself. I thought he did a good job doing some of, especially Ralph. I think that's going to be how I ever think of Ralph, as that voice. Some of the other voices, sure, but successful in many ways, but really bad in others.
I felt a lot like this was like Stephen King purging him of the almost like, because we had all within like a 3-year span, right? He wrote Gerald's Game about spousal abuse. He wrote Dolores Claiborne about spousal abuse. He wrote Rose Matter, which I really like, which I think Luke should read on his own, because there's this whole weird Greek twist to it about a painting and traveling through painting. And we didn't pick it because it's a little out there, but read it. Okay. Guess what it's about? Spousal abuse. So now we pick it up again. Only this time we're going to throw in the like socio-political pro-life versus pro-choice thing. And here's my problem with it. Okay, like I'm all for having political debates in books. I like that he brings that real world thing to it. I get that like he's purging through something with spousal abuse. I think that stems back from his parents. Like I get it. I'm fine with all of it. But I read Needful Things. And in Needful Things, when I've got two main groups with huge differing beliefs, they end up bringing the pitchforks and fighting each other in the middle of town square. That didn't happen. I kind of wanted it to. You know what I mean? Like, it's this big build-up, and there's no...
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's other big things. I'm not saying, like, oh, we just sat around and did nothing, but, like, I didn't get any sort of...
I mean, those things did happen. It just wasn't like a big hyper climax, right? It was smaller things like, oh, a massacre in the street. Oh, no big deal.
I want pitchforks. I want vampires.
So a couple things to that, Melissa. First of all, I surprisingly will disagree with you, but respectfully, and not like in a bad way. First, with the Needful Things, remember that was a satire. He even said this is satire.
I know.
But anyway, onto that. I'm kind of glad he didn't do that with these groups, because there is, especially at that time and even now with this issue that we're talking about, the abortion issue, there is a great divide in this country, and I'm glad that he was actually able to show the saner sides of both issues. Because even when we start the book, Ralph was like, the guy from the uh, uh, Rose and Clothes place. I remember it.
Secondhand clothes.
Thank you. Yes, that guy. He was like, trying to get him sign the petition. Ralph's like, and he's not really for it. He's like, I'm not saying I'm against it, but seriously, I'm not really for it either. Kind of thing. And playing a fairly mild, medium, and even on the nut job, pro-lifer side, most of them weren't nut jobs. Most of them were just like, this is wrong. This is, you had the small sect of extremists, kind of thing. And I liked that he played it fairly, knowing Stephen King's politics and, everything like that. He could have really just buried everybody that he didn't agree with. But he actually played a fairly balanced, dynamic in that situation. So that's one reason why I'm glad it didn't come to the pitchforks and, guns and automatic weapons and everything like that, because that is more real life. It's, hey, we disagree. We can do this peacefully. We can have a peaceful disagreement.
We can?
And then get blown up by a plane in C4.
I mean, there were still some other murders. There were still some other murders from one side to the other, back and forth, like multiple times. They were just skirmishes. But
yes,
this isn't Civil War where you have those things. This is everyday life, but it's just not the big, huge story of pitchforks, shootouts in the middle, or like the gang that pulls into Old Dairy Town, right? Mm-hmm. And the entire city shows up and just opens up.
This is Dairy. Where is granted, like, I feel like the plane crash kind of fits the need, but, and it's an off-year cycle. I get it. It's 1994. We're only 9 years out. We still have 18 to go. So, like, fine.
There's still some really solid Kingfish stuff going on.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I feel like Benji's next two comments and Luke's middle comment all tie into the greater realm.
It's like the actual story.
No idea about, except not the real, like not the surface layer of Ralph's story.
You're saying huge Stephen King universe story. It's pretty obvious what we're talking about here. It's really plain. Go for it, Benj.
Well, I'll start with. Actually, I'll start with mine. The Crimson King. I'll start on that level there, because mine, the purpose and the random, I guess that ties in as well. I was more coming from a aspectorial mindset. But the Crimson King, a lot of people I've read online, there's a debate. I don't know if it's been cleared up, but there was debate. Is that Pennywise? Is that it? I have a theory that no, it is not. That is the other that was talked about between the turtle and Pennywise, or in that scene in the Grey Realm. He's the third. We discussed, is there a third?
That great
and
other.
I think, I think that might fall under the Crimson King. That's at least my theory on it, because he's not quite helpful, and he's evil, but he's also has a purpose. Like, he serves both the purpose and the random, I believe he's at top of both, and he realizes what's going on. And again, I have not read any of the Dark Tower series. I have no knowledge of it, so this is all just theory I'm working with. But I think I know that obviously the Crimson King is a larger aspect than even played up to be here. Luke, you can go with
your... I mean, I don't have any way of telling you if it's Pennywise or not, but there are definitely some obvious things where there's some major similarities. I mean, he literally calls himself the Kingfish, which is a specific name Pennywise calls himself. That happens. But other than that, I mean, it's Derry. It's a pretty fucked up place, and like, it doesn't surprise me if it is. To one, I don't have enough information outside of we didn't see very much here. No. I think the thing that caught my attention most was definitely the multiple layered, the unveiling of this tower of reality thing, where they're ascending and descending from like planes of reality, and they can only interact, and communicate and touch things when there's certain levels apart or at the same levels. Like, you can interact if it's within, I don't know, a level or two, but you can't like physically touch unless it's like within a level. I don't know, it's weird, but like, it obviously seems to be setting up or just bringing into one of the books that we've read this notion of the Dark Tower series, which I know basically nothing about. But from what I get here, it's obviously that's what we're talking about. And to me, it really feels very Dungeons and Dragons, Planes of Hell kind of. There's different planes of reality in there, and so I kind of just see some similarities. It's definitely its own thing, but there are definitely things that you can do to transfer from one plane of existence to another, and different planes of reality. And so I almost look at it in that aspect, but it's definitely its own different thing, that we just have someone who's, I'm going to say, ignorant to what's going on and kind of running through on training wheels in our story. So we don't really have a great viewpoint of what this all means, right? We just have someone who's experiencing it for the first time. But it's really intriguing, for sure. Like, I find it very fascinating on how these different levels all interact and who these different characters are the higher up the rungs you go, and like what level is Pennywise in there. Like, if he is his own thing, like he definitely has his own abilities that seem like he's a heightened level, but it might not be that high. You know, it might be the Fates level almost, where it's just like 2 or 3 levels up, but definitely not Crimson King level. Who knows? I don't know. It's a lot of questions that we certainly don't get answered in this book.
Yeah, and again, I know nothing about the Dark Tower. I haven't gone through it, but this is the third tech. If you want to count this in the Dark Tower series, which I know it's not, I know it's not, but this came after. This was the third iteration, or after this. There were 3 books before this. I thought there was only 2. Okay,
Pretty sure there's 3.
Okay, because there's 7 total, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, 7 total, and I thought one was
might actually be even more by now, but
okay, because I thought I read it was 82, 88, this one, and the next one in 95, but I could be wrong about that.
Maybe.
So anyway, but
I
like
don't know.
I
I'm not
think,
so worried about that.
yeah,
No.
and
3 came out in 91.
okay, gotcha. Now I thought I was so smart or everything, not really, but as I'm listening to this, realizing because it's our part of Dark Tower, we get the name of the gunslinger, and I don't know if that was new information when this book came out then, because I was always told, or I was always in the impression that was the Man in Black, the gunslinger. That's all he was called. He hadn't been named. And I heard that, I was like, okay, and I wasn't sure, so I thought that was like a cool little thing. Like, oh shit, okay, this is where he actually gets named, and we finally find out who this, what this character's, whatever is. But I guess I'm wrong about that. It's a series I'm going to read. That's
no, you have to wait.
I know.
We'll get there.
Okay,
we'll get
so
there. I promise.
Yeah. I know. Trust me, there's plenty more that I'd rather read than that series right now.
Okay.
But so I'll get on my other thought here. The purpose and the random. I like that just as a outward thought process. It's not good and evil. It's not right and wrong. It's what's planned and what's unplanned. It's the chaos theory, and then some. Kind of thing. And I kind of dig that mentality. Never really considered it too much, but here in Atropos and who are the other 2?
Lykesis and
Chlor or something.
Clothos.
I mean, I hated hearing them talk. It's just the way they spoke. It was like weird to listen to. But it was interesting seeing that dynamic and how, they're just on the low rung. They're just like one step above the human race on the rung of hierarchy. But these 3 people have this much control. They might be only being in control of dairy. Who knows? But these 3 beings, for being the low rung on this system, on this tower, have this much control over human and everyday life. And it's just an interesting, dynamic that you never really think about, but it's like, that just shows how big the universe really could be,
And it's all in the back of a turtle.
Exactly.
Sorry, wait. Wrong world. That's it.
That's a Discworld that you might be thinking of.
I did that on purpose.
I know. Great, Altuin. There were definitely some Mort things that I thought about with this, just for how much life and death this book is, just ingrained in it. Yeah, definitely had some Mort and the Grim Reaper and death thoughts, but nothing specific enough to bring in. Check out more on the Gets Lit podcast, Mort episode from 2 months ago.
Whew, Mort might be like my favorite book you guys have
I love that book so much.
It's so good.
funny.
I feel like okay, so we kind of talked about the little men in the doctor's coats. Like you guys mentioned Atropos, and I like that Lachesis and Clothos, and you know me in names.
Mhm.
I'm not so good with names, so I'm just gonna call them CNL. CNL were like buddies with like clean jackets, just doing a good, blue collar guys' day work, right? Checking out. And here's Atropos, who's like a nut job,
Oh, wild
walking
card.
around, needs a bath and a haircut, and probably his scissors disinfected, so some hand sanitizer. I don't know. Like I just
He
really
uses
like.
scalpel.
Still needs hand sanitizer. Like we got to clean that thing off. I like the way they were written and explained and described. Like they were fully formed characters, right? And there was a lot of characters in this book, and a lot of them kind of flew right past me. But those three stood out and were very clearly defined as two separate entities. To go into your Benji, the purpose and the random, that was very clear from when we met them. So I kind of liked that. Yeah, I like the little men in the doctor's coats. Read Hearts.
I did too. I really enjoyed them, and like I felt robbed as I kept reading, and they brought up, Stephen King specifically writes in that, oh yeah, they're basically just the Greek fates. I was like, damn it, that's exactly what I was going to call them on the podcast when we got there. And then the book went on for 13 more hours and like really unpacked that. But I was like, man, I was gonna feel really good about like making a cool connection, and like, oh well, that's pretty obvious. But it was just so funny because I was like, you son of a bitch, Stephen King. But like that whole scene when they're in the hospital, right, and they're there for like a week because time flows at a different rate when you're at these elevated levels. So it's Ralph and Lois talking to both C and L. And I love how they unpack that whole purpose and random aspect of things. And just the whole way that death works, at least in this story, it makes me think, hey, are the rest of them, they fall into this exact same kind of situation? I don't know. I thought it was really neat. And it only took like 45 pages to really unpack all that, but it was probably my favorite 45 pages of the book.
Like the scene on the top of
In the hospital.
Yep.
Yeah, mine too. Except I have like Bill McGovern deserved a better send off.
Oh, that pissed me off
Yeah,
so much.
but that's
Right?
that's the point, right?
I know.
Like that's
Yeah.
why
But,
it
like,
sucks.
here's his best friend, and then like I'm gonna keep you talking for 4 days, literally, and the next thing you know, your buddy died.
Mhm.
Without any word from you, without knowing where you're like nothing. Yeah, that it was just like
It's a gut punch, that's for sure.
like honestly, it felt lazy. Like I'm not gonna lie. I kind of felt lazy. Like Bill McGovern was such a great character. King knew he had to kill him off. How can I kill this guy off without coming across as homophobic? Without, I mean, he's not afraid to do that, but like without delving into that realm again and everything along those lines. So it's like, you know what? I'll just tie him up for 3 or 4 days and heart attack. It just felt like he didn't know how to end that good of a character, so he just said, meh. And I could be wrong about that. It just felt like I just did not like that. It was just it felt weak on that end.
I don't know. I thought it was selling the point on Ralph's side of it, obviously, right? Where you have this loss and you weren't able to process it because you weren't given the chance. That's real. That's real life. I mean, that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hear, oh wow, that person is dead. Like I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, but like wow, that's I wish I would have known. Like that's a real life thing that happens, and I think that's a really quick way of getting that, eliciting those feelings. I'm not saying it's the greatest narration or narrative tool, but That's what I got out of it, at least, is sometimes it isn't perfect, and sometimes it does just happen, and you can't be there. That's just how I read it, but I can understand your side too.
I'm fine with all that. I just like it just always hits me of like, and he just died. Like that's one of the few emotional responses, and again I don't cry, so not that emotional, but few emotional responses I had in this whole book. I wasn't really sad when Carol died. Like I wasn't super, I mean, and I'd read it before, so I wasn't super shocked when Deep Nose wife Helen came all beat up, but like when Bill died and they just kind of missed it, it was like, oh, that it just was sad, and I don't know why that hit me and nothing else did.
And Lois kind of had that reaction as well, you know, 'cause she's kind of like I said the same thing. He deserved better, but then Lois literally like 3 pages later says the exact same thing. I'm like, son of a bitch! I can't, like you said, I can't say that. But I had a quick question. What family of O'Doyle's named Nell did piss off Stephen King when he was a kid? He has now killed off 2 Officer Nells in Derry. Yeah.
Oh, I guess the old one. When did he die?
Died of the heart attack during the flood, like during the flood, and I guess this is his son now.
It was his grandson.
It
was his grandson.
Yeah.
They said it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Grandson gets killed at the cabin.
All right, I'm gonna say you're not allowed to make that reference until we have a 3rd dead Nell. I will kill you if we run across a book where they kill off a 3rd Nell. Okay.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Okay. Luke, you've got one more person you'd like to have a comment about.
Yeah, so this is actually pretty... there's a lot that goes on towards the end of the book, right? It gets pretty hectic, but still in a slogging kind of way, which is weird.
It's getting wild.
Great song, great band. But there is definitely like a lot of slogging, even when things are moving, which is just weird. It's maybe just because like the tone was set so hard early, it just still feels like that. But this is a person that we meet pretty early on when Ralph's going through his insomnia, and it's the pharmacist that he goes and sees at Rite Aid, Joe Weiser. And I don't know, this guy, I just loved him. And this is like still so early. We have no indication about anything else, like any of what I called the real story. This is just Ralph struggling, and this is like the one person that's actually been able to like get to him and like actually provide some help, and it was awesome. Like I was just like, man, that guy's awesome. He just didn't, with no judgment, was there to help him out, and knew that it was a tough problem, and spoke to him respectfully. I mean, he really took care of Ralph, and I don't know, it just stuck with me on when everything else was just kind of plodding along. I thought that was a phenomenal scene. I loved that scene in the pharmacy, and yeah, it was just a nice, very well written. I thought just a character that we don't really see much again, but he did a job, and it was good.
Okay. All right. Question discussions that I pulled out of my ass 15 minutes ago, because there are no book clubs that have question discussions for this book. Just so you know.
I wonder why.
Question 1. Okay. So it was our first Stephen King book here on the show. Explain how you relate the dairy of it to the dairy of Insomnia.
I feel like it's way more docile. It's much calmer in general, and like you mentioned, we're on an off-cycle year, and or potentially Pennywise is actually defeated and gone, at least for several cycles. You know, or just gone for good. You know, who knows? And we always talked about how it was Pennywise in the dirt of Derry, right? Just in the drinking water, in the ingrained being that is the character of the culture in Derry. Like, if that's removed, these are just people being assholes now, and not necessarily being ramped up artificially to have that heightened response like maybe you were looking for with the pitchforks and things like that. Maybe that's why that doesn't happen as well, is because you don't have that even heightening that instigator that Pennywise is, jumping in to help with the gunfight and jumping in to help with, the burning of the black spot. And I think that is how I view it right now, is removing him, removing the being that is Pennywise. It changes these people to just be inherently assholes a little bit more than normal, potentially, but way calmer and docile than they were previously.
I want to throw one other thing at you before Benji talk, because I just want to throw this in Luke's brain. I had a similar feeling that it was, I like the word docile. Like, it was almost hard to recognize Derry for me because I wasn't in the Barrens and I wasn't racing down at Mile Hill and I wasn't, but like, it was still Derry. The other perspective to keep in mind is that we saw Derry from the perspective of an 11-year-old or of a 40-year-old returning to a home they haven't really seen since they were 11. We're not even looking at a perspective from a middle-aged person. The perspective we're getting is from retirees, from 70 plus years old who've lived there for 60 more years than our It characters had. Of course, Pennywise is not going to be as influential in their lives because they made it through their cycle, right? Mm-hmm. Pennywise doesn't worry about the old. So, like, while I had a hard time finding Derry, I think it's because age-wise, they've made it through Derry, if that makes sense.
And so they're in the blinders on side of it where they actively don't see it anymore. But I feel like we were seeing it in passing is where I was looking for it. So Benji, go for it.
So a couple things. First, Melissa, your point. It was hard for me to feel like I was in Derry because I kept going up Niebolt Street instead of Niebolt.
Which... just the narrator says it differently.
Anyway, just had to get that one out there. But really, with it, I think it might be a mix of both. As you said, Luke, the people are just kind of being genuine assholes, but they're more polite than they were more attentive in this book than they were in Derry. Even the adults in Derry weren't attentive, or they were obviously trying to avoid the confrontation or avoid any hassle. In this one, they're actively trying to get into the confrontation, but they're being polite about it to a point. Like you said, there's a couple kerfluffles and everything, but that was more from the extremist sides than the middle of the road people who were just, took one side or the other. And I think them could be either, it's a down year, or Pennywise is defeated. In the fact, I would lean more towards Pennywise defeated, because typically what you would see is the old town wouldn't talk about what happened. And Ralph kept referring back to when the flood and the town collapsed, like up Mile Hill, half the city collapsed into the Kandusky. Mm-hmm. He referred to that several times, to the Great Flood. True. And most of the time when you had stuff like that, they would just be just blank on it. What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, is it lip mouth, or just forget about it? They just wouldn't think
amnesia about it. Or choice. Choosing ignorance.
Yeah.
Actively.
Thank you. Active amnesia. Yeah, and it's so I think that shows a lack of Pennywise power in the town, because people are remembering, or at least Ralph is remembering it, who's been through 3 cycles. He never mentioned the black spot. He never mentioned the shooting. He never mentioned, what was the big one before 54. He didn't mention
Georgie was the start of...
Yeah, what was the start? What was the big blow up? Oh no, the blow up never happened.
It never happened because they prevented it,
stopped it. So, but he doesn't mention any of those kind of things. He does specifically mention 1985 multiple times. So to me, I think that's a big difference in the town. That's why I think the losers might have actually succeeded back in 85, because the town now typically, instead of being, we don't care, we do whatever you want to do, just leave us alone, we're going to go about our business, they're actively coming together on one side or another for this issue that's being brought together. So that's kind of where I stand with that. That makes me think that maybe he was defeated and the powers kind of dissipated.
Okay. Question number 2. There were a lot of societal commentary in this book. In your opinion, was it too much, just right, not enough? Why?
Well, I kind of talked about this earlier. Knowing King's politics, when I first started, like when they first started coming up, I'm like, oh shit, here we go. Okay, let's see how far he goes this way with it. And he really didn't. It was a main driving force through the whole book until you realized it had nothing to do with the story, which was like, okay.
Well, you
But
had to get halfway through the book to find the story. So, in your
well,
defense, that makes sense.
true, true, but it was planted in early on. But I think he played a fine line. He didn't overdo it, in my opinion. With it, he used a social commentary, social issue, and wove it all throughout the story. And I think it worked for the story itself.
Yeah, I think I agree. I don't think it went too far one direction or the other. He really did kind of play both cards, and have. There was probably a hinge towards one side being more.
Sane.
More what?
Sane.
I was going to say reasonable.
I was going on the other side. One side being more actively violent and just combative about it than the other side. But in general, I thought it was pretty reasonably done to have it be a part of the story without really making it a story about that. And you did get both sides, and you did get both sides doing things that were wrong and things that were. I mean, they both made good points, right? That's why it's a healthy discussion. But I don't think it dominated the story. It was definitely really prevalent in some of the areas that felt like it was slogging along. So maybe it could have been trimmed a bit, but I don't think anything that was done badly, if that makes sense. Like, I thought it was fair.
So you guys took my question different than I intended it, and that's totally fine because I think your answer was way more thoughtful and educated sounded than mine would be. I thought it was too much because the book was too long and therefore it wasn't as needed as he put it in.
Yeah.
Like, to me it was
Yep.
it was pointless. Like, you could have done that with much less backstory to it and achieved the same goal. That's an easy thing to lift out.
I think
You've
so.
already got spousal abuse. You've already got like the wife living in the shelter. You've got all of that. You can put the abortion issue in there and that's fine, but like it just, to me, I was like, oh, whatever, I don't even care anymore. Like, just stop talking about it and like fight a bad guy or make a decision or do something.
Now, one thing to that point, Melissa, I want to give a shout out to Susan Day on it because when we finally get to hear her talk, we finally meet her. First words out of her mouth are, "This is not a revolution. This is not an active fight. This is discussion." Whack! Window pane glass through the neck, or whatever. However she died.
She beheaded.
Beheaded. And it's like, God damn it, Ed. She was actually, trying to be reasonable with you here. And it's like, now, as we're talking about with Bill being quick and that one was fitting. I mean, and I liked her. Like, I wanted to hear more from her, but it was one of those ironic deaths that was like, okay, that one was funny.
Yeah, that was totally funny. I'm with you on that.
And that's why I really liked, Benji, when you said it's funny when, 3/4 of the story we find out that what we think is like this major storyline really doesn't end up mattering in the least. Like, I think that's where that is like just even proven to be even more true. Is just it didn't really matter. That's not at all what this is about.
Nope. All right, question 3. What are your thoughts on so many lives being altered and impacted just to save Patrick, the one boy?
I have a thought, Luke, but if you guys
go for it. Go for it.
I think it can make sense in the grand scheme of things with the random and purpose kind of mentality. If he is there to serve one person, let the boy live to achieve this one goal, fine. But at the same point, I can say the exact same thing on the opposite scale. That's on the purpose side. On the random side, for Natalie. The little girl, Natalie. Igno, thank you. Ralph taking it into his hands of saying, fine, I will do this. I will save your boy if you save my girl. And that's it. And and I think it's that nice counterbalance where it falls into, and I like the aspect of, yes, there is a plan, there is a purpose for everything. Sure, if you believe that, great. But there's a plan, and this boy falls into the plan. So yeah, we'll sacrifice 2,000 lives for this one boy. It's you think maybe there's a different way to get around it. Maybe say, hey, Ralph, why don't you grab this boy and take him the fuck out of here before any of this happens? But again, narration, we won't get the full story, everything like that. But at the same point, give him a little insight, instead of being vague. What's the good of being vague? It's the Dumbledore dynamic, the one major flaw in the plan kind of thing.
Yeah, so. I mean, the way you just put that, it really even gave me a further, like, just classic Greek play type thing because there's so much prophecy in Greek plays, and it's always like, oh, this is the boy that's gonna grow up and dethrone you, king, whatever, and oh, I'm gonna go and kill him now then, right? And guess what? It doesn't happen. And then guess what? Just because you did that, you gave him the reason to want to kill you when he's older, kind of thing. Like
and a cool scar.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. It's classic stuff, right? And it feels very frustrating when you're reading it. Sometimes you're like, okay, if we just would have known like what the end game needed to be, yeah, like we could have just taken him to San Francisco for the weekend. Like, hey, like that'd have been easier than inciting this whole thing. And
let's go to Disney World.
Right. Like it just.
You, Natalie, come on.
And like he still would have ended up saving all those people from the plane, right? Like that's what the other thing that happens is, yeah, to save this one boy, but there is still they're trying to save all these people because he's included in that group. So if the boy's not there, then those 2,000 people are dead in this case. So it's a little odd in that it's not like he's choosing 1 or 2,000. He's one of the 2,000.
And Lachesis did.
Mm-hmm.
Like the random and the purpose, not so much Ralph, but the higher ups were like, none of the rest of this matters, just this one person.
Right. No, I understand.
It's questionable to me.
Yeah, I don't really know how I feel about it. I think it's complicated and convoluted, and that's why it's worth talking about, I guess. Good question.
Ben, any thoughts?
No, I mean, I kind of went through it, but yeah, I mean, it's yeah.
Okay, yeah. Like, that's how I feel. Like, okay, I get it for the purpose of the story, and I don't know, later on, who knows what this kid's gonna do. Like, it kind of says that he has to be somewhere in 18 years. Great. Or something. I don't know. I by that point, my eyes were crossed. I just wanted to.
He was an artist. That's what it was.
He's an artist, and this is what they say in the epilogue, so I'm not from anything else. No. He goes and shoots. He has to be in the certain spot to shoot this one person to save these 2 other guys. That's his whole purpose. And it's like, you couldn't destine somebody else for that one or anything, and that's your whole purpose for saving him and for putting these 2,000 people at risk or however many. It's like, yeah, that seems a bit overkill,
That's
my point. Yeah, they used the 2,000 people to encourage Ralph to save him. That was the mentality, was use those 2,000, and Ralph could give a shit less. He's like, fuck it, I don't care. I'm tired.
I literally just want to nap, because not only have you taken away my sleep for months and months, you haven't let me sleep in 4.5 days. Not even like my hour, like at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why prophecy and fates are bunk. It's all just storytelling.
All right. Last question. Who was the Green Man who came to help Ralph right on
Lois
the plane?
Saw him. Right.
Right before Lois calls him. Like, he's kind of there on the plane with Ed and like doing a thing, and the Green Man's kind of there. Who was it? What is it? How does that guy fit?
I don't know. Some other being. Just some other higher level entity that I'm sure shows up somewhere else. That's how I feel about it. Like, I've got nothing.
Like, I know enough about King to know he's probably important, but not important here.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, he popped in, did a job. Okay, see ya. Whatever. I'm out.
See, I was just waiting for him to come in and say, "Hello, Dum Dum. Great kazoo." That's my. I have no. I honestly didn't even remember the Green Man on the plane. By that point, I was like, what? So no clue.
That
All
whole
right.
scene was confusing too, because it's like, oh, Ralph's in one area, and all of a sudden he just like ascends to a higher level and ends up on the plane, and then like it was weird, right?
So for me, for that part, like I knew that was so for like when they finally were like going, I was like, oh, they're gonna go. It's gonna be like the plane thing. I remembered the plane thing, and then they went to the house and stopped the fire, and I was like, okay, now they're gonna go stop the plane, and then they went and talked. Then they went to Atropos's like tree hut hovel.
Garbage house, yeah.
It was like, okay. Then I was like, okay, now they're gonna go to the plane, and then they were like, kiss us and clothe us, and I was like, when are we getting to the plane? I just want the plane because I know the plane means the book is over. That was the important thing. So I was like, oh, okay. And then he walked into the bathroom, and the bathroom was teleported him up to the airplane. I'm like, great. And then I like lost focus, and all of a sudden Ed was dead, and I was like, I think I missed.
I had to rewind it like 2 or 3 times. It's like, either I got distracted or this just isn't making sense. I don't know what just happened here.
Yeah, I remember like Ralph, the way he got Ed's attention was taking the picture, basically.
Yeah.
That's what. Yeah, because he's like, they're mine, and I guess he felt this was his way of getting them back, because Susan Day was the one who stole his wife from him. Even though, we all know he's the reason.
Sure.
But. Yep. And everything like that, and so this is his way of getting him or her and his kid back, and all that, and that's the click back to reality for him. Oops, there goes Rabbit. He just jumped back into it, and they realize like, Ralph, what the fuck are you doing here? And Ralph's like, here, stop you. But yeah, at that point, I don't even remember the Green Man or anything like that. But so yeah, it was kind of a gloss over.
This is how much I'm checked out of this story. When you were talking, you said things and 2 different songs popped into my head. The first one was Back to Life, Back to Reality. And then I went with like an Eminem. Oh, there's Ghost Rider.
That's the one he was going with, yeah.
I made the joke on that one.
I did see, but
Mom Spaghetti.
Yeah, Mom Spaghetti.
I'm out.
Yeah.
Okay. My favorite thing. Luke, you don't have a favorite thing, so I will let you go last. I will go first because mine's not great. So Ben, you'll be right in the middle because yours is relatively decent. My favorite thing was Lois, simply because I liked the caricature of her that we saw early in the book, and I liked that she was actually a real person, that Ralph was seeing through the lens of somebody who saw her as a caricature, and as he gets to know her better, and she really is a really good person with like kind of a no nonsense, we're just going to deal with it and move on, but also old school, like lady type, like very ladylike and different things. I don't know. She was just fun to listen to. Whenever she was on screen, if you will, I was like, oh, okay, Lois is here. What are they going to do? Like when they're sitting at the diner and he orders this like massive amount of food because they haven't eaten in 4 days, and the waitress is like, what's going on? And she turns to Lois, and Lois goes, I'll have the same.
Yeah.
I like her. So that's my favorite. Then
so my favorite, it was hard to pick on this, just it's not because there were so many favorites, it was hard to remember what my favorite was. And I went with, if you're gonna have an agent of chaos, make him like Atropos. He is a great agent of chaos, and especially being the low man kind of, he's the Joker's lackey, is the best way to put it. He's like Joker Jr., if you can, because he's foul-mouthed, he's vicious. I want to kick him in the dick for what he did to Rosalie #1, just saying. That's the one that got me the most, was the dog. You heard a dog. You got number 1 on my list, but in the negative way. But he was just a good character that you could get behind, saying, we have to stop him. Then you realize he doesn't mean shit. All he did was try to get Ed, and then he cut the line, and shit went off the rails, because there's something else in Ed that I don't even know if we ever got the answer for why Ed was so fucked once his aura cord got cut. But it's, on that front, I liked having Atropos being, the sniveling, just foul mouth guy. But then at the end, when he's like getting tortured and everything, and just finally breaking down, and he's like, they're gonna kill me, they'll do worse to me. And Ralph's like, I don't give a shit. And everyone's like, okay, fine. It's like, I'll ask you once. No. Ask you twice. Fuck you. Ask you 3 times. Okay, here's how you do it.
Oh, he asked me 3 times again. Dang it.
And
the wretched third ask.
I'll never tell.
Okay, a little.
As a caricature and an what's the melodrama, like melodramatic kind of character, over the top,
snidely whiplash.
Yes, we don't get those a lot in King books, and when you do, you gotta kind of appreciate it. So I that's why I picked Extras for mine.
All right, so my favorite thing in this book, I'm going to give an honorable mention to Joe Weiser, the pharmacist, because great scene for a really boring patch of the book. But the thing that I want to say I appreciate the most in this book is what I'm going to call really the instigating scene. It really sets the rest of the story off. It kind of kicks off the real story, in my opinion, is in the hospital or on the hospital roof with Klothos and Lykesis. And they basically just, like I said, it spends, I don't know, audiobook, it's like an hour. It's like 45 pages in the book of really unraveling, just a lot of nerdy magic world building stuff that I really, really like. I love to understand how this system works and what's going on and what their job is. And obviously we don't get everything from them, and we learn more about the things that they weren't telling us later, but just the unveiling of this hierarchy of realities. And I just thought that was really well done. And like Benji brought up too, the purpose and random, as facet of death in these books, where some have a purpose, and it's not a right thing. It's not a, foreseen thing. It's dying with purpose compared to the random ones where it's like, well, okay, Hatchbros had to get his too. I just loved the whole magical theory, underlying world that we get here. So yeah, that's me.
Okay. All right, now comes my favorite part of this episode, where everybody starts fighting. Typically, although I think today's going to be a little bit easier. So I'm going to run through the list. This is where Luke and Benji and I all three, not both, there's 3 of us, so all 3 of us decide where in our list of collectively read Stephen King novels this ranks. Right, and we have a formula that automatically determines, once we all put in our answers, it automatically determines for us where this will fall. I'm going to read, for those of you watching and listening, the current list. Number 1, Dolores Claiborne. Number 2, Pet Sematary. 3 is Misery. 4 was Needful Things. 5, Gerald's Game. 6 was It. 7 was Shining. 8 was Cujo. 9, Salem's Lot. And 10 is Carrie. So this will take it up to 11. So we have from spots 1 through 11. So you're saying
it goes to 11?
It goes to 11. Why didn't you just make 10 louder?
But it goes to 11.
All right. It looks like you guys are in your boxes. Can I get a thumb? Are you guys all ready? Yes. Okay, 1, 2, 3, hit enter. Ooh, Luke. So I said it was 10, and I will tell you why. I dislike Carrie a lot. I think at least Insomnia has some characters that I can get behind and care about. And Carrie, I didn't care about anybody. Luke says 11. Luke, why did you pick 11?
It's just, it could have been half the book and hit the important stuff, and could have fit nicely with the length of the other books that we've had lately. Those were the right length. This one, unnecessarily long and drawn out.
All right. Benji, rounding it out, picked 7. So do you want to give us your explanation there?
Yeah. In all reality, yes, it was a long book. I barely paid attention to, say, 30% of it. However, the story behind it was better than Cujo, Salem's Lot, and Carrie, and on par with The Shining. I actually kind of enjoy this a little bit more than The Shining story-wise, and so that's kind of where I went with it. The Shining is very boring to me, except for maybe the last, fifth of the book. The Shining is pretty boring all in general. This one actually had little bits all throughout, and it had a political intrigue that kind of will grab my attention. So I wanted to I knew you guys probably rate this lower, so I wanted to try to make sure this was higher above a couple of them at least. So
strategery.
A little strategery there. But I mean, I put this on par with The Shining in my enjoyment.
That's also what I did too. Some strategic play with putting it very last, just to really put an anchor on there. Just
yeah. No, that's fair.
See, I put it where I thought it belonged.
When it comes down to it,
I put mine where I think it belongs. It's above Cujo, Salem's, and Carrie.
I would read Carrie again. It's so short. It's a quick thing. Fair. This is a bit more of an investment that I'm just not going to do again. That's where I'm at. And I will absolutely read Cujo again. I will definitely read it and Salem's Lot again. I need to read Salem's Lot again because
yes, you do, because it's way better than what we ranked.
It's not much better than this though. I don't know. It's boring.
I don't know. I cared about the characters way more in that, and I felt like it was the story itself was more linear, and therefore it made more sense. There was a lot of pieces going on here that maybe weren't necessary. Good for the greater world that he's building to pull in for fan service, but not.
That's how I feel about it. There's some really cool stuff that's really useful, but not for this book.
And out of context, it doesn't work.
It doesn't really matter to me at all.
Yeah, the story itself doesn't matter.
So, for those of you who are not mathematicians and haven't averaged this out, it came to an average of 9 point something, which really doesn't matter because then it makes it 9. Which means Insomnia now has taken Salem's Lot place. I don't know why it's not typing for me. Insomnia has taken Salem's Lot's place as the 9th novel. Salem's Lot is now 10, and Carrie is still holding strong as our least favorite novel currently. All right. Final thoughts. Benj, start with you.
Dun bun can't be undone. Hearing that line over and over through the book, I had no fucking clue what it meant. Like, no clue. Like, it just kept saying it over and over again. I'm like, no, what the hell? So I finally Googled it after I got done with the book. Tried Googling it, and first thing comes up is Insomnia. Mentioned like 83 times in the book or something like that. But it basically broke down to me of a done bun can't be undone. So if you bake something, like you mix the dough and put it in the oven, you're done. You've made a bun. You cannot take it back. So once you do something, there's no going back. You can say, oh, I should have done this or I could. Well, what's the point? What's the point in trying to go back and fix the past? Because you can't fix the past. You can only prevent the future. And that is a great iteration for this story is you can't fix what's happened already, but you can maybe change what's going to happen or prevent something from happening. And so hearing that over and over again, it stuck with me. And so that's why it's there.
All right. Mine was that it was just long. I just didn't care. And that's awful. I want to care. I try to care. I tried. I failed. I didn't care. And it, because it was just too long. And I like big books, and I cannot lie. But I don't like things that I have to put that much effort into finishing. Loop.
I felt like it was a slog. I really did. It was hard to be invested, and I liked a lot of the characters. Like, that's what's weird is, like, I was invested in Ralph. I thought he was a great character, and like you said, Bill was great, and Joe Weiser and Lois. Like, there was a lot of great characters, not to mention this mythical kind of interdimensional thing that's going on. Like, there's really cool things. The story just suffers from being boring, I think. Like, it just takes way too long for anything to happen that's worth reading. It sucks that the thing that the book is named after is like the worst part.
Or is not a side effect of the book. In fact, it's the opposite, right? Like, oh, I'm going to read it.
Yeah.
That might be the purpose for the book. It's like, hey, Insomnia, do you have it? Read this.
Sure.
Here's your prescription.
Wrong one. Where'd it go? I dropped it.
Here's your honeycomb.
Right. That's good.
All right, boys.
All right.
Take us out.
So make sure you're following us on social media at Floats Down here on Twitter and Instagram. Send us your digital auras, whether they be blue, orange, red, or black, to floatsdownhere@gmail.com. Make sure you're checking out all of our stuff at thepodcastthat.com. Subscribe, like, and rate us on iTunes and YouTube under Drawbridge Media.
We hope you do enjoy our shows and that you find out that this show and all of our shows at thepodcastthat.com are produced with the love and support of our wonderful Imaginary Legion patrons. They learned more about our reward tiers by going to patreon.com/stayimaginary, and you can too.
Woo-hoo! We'll be back in November with the second to last book in our 2020 read along, right? But don't worry, we have more to come in 2021. But our second to last book is called The Green Mile. Welcome to Cold Mountain Penitentiary Death Row, where inmates take a final walk down a hallway called The Green Mile.
You'll float too.
Stay imaginary.
Thanks.
The podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first-time Stephen King reader.